Well, hello and welcome to the stream. Let's go ahead and see what we're going to get into. We're going to do a little bit of Fukushima radiation at Chernobyl, where our Bill talks with Andrew Carey about the radiation lab in Chernobyl today.
Getting 35 million different references to conduit the virus sucker that carried this. I'm telling you, you don't want to do that. Beware, beware, beware. There'll be flash update. It says HD requires. And if you do that, you're dead meat. And I mean that. Dead meat. In other words, you'll bring up a browser and it will be stuck on some stupid sweet something or another search engine that you'll never be able to get rid of. This is a bad one, folks. So after I don't know, 3-4 hours in the registry and, in the program files, I think I probably have rid of it. But I would like to meet whoever wrote this thing in person. And if I could meet you, know this. I would put my fair-sized hands around your throat, get you on the floor, and choke you while I watch your body twitch. Not only that, but I will choke you and watch the light drain from your eyes, the light drain from your very eyes, and I will smile down at you as you pass to the other world. Otherwise, it was a great day. But be careful. We've got a ghost picture contest going on. The grand prize, if you're the winner, who's judged by all of you, is a brand new satellite radio and a 1-year subscription to Sirius XM. That's right, a brand new radio, Sirius XM radio, and a 1-year subscription. That's not small potatoes. So if you have a ghost photograph and you think it would be a winner, all you've got to do is send it off to webmaster at artbell.com. People put it up on the site. You'll be judged. If you're the winner, you get the radio and the subscription. Webmaster at artbell.com. And of course, our ghost stories for spooky matter. Send them to me, please. If you've got a ghost story, it's simple. Just send a little paragraph summary of it. Include your phone number and send it to me personally at I'm artbell at artbell.com. artbell@artbell.com. And don't forget Art's Parts. Very important. T-shirts, mugs, caps, all with dark matter. And they've got to have my signature on it. For them to be authentic, they've got to have my signature. And why is that? Because, again, it's an ad, right? Everybody's putting up other sites and trying to market stuff. Well, it's not the real thing unless it's got my signature on it. And if that happens, and they copy my signature, then legal cement shoes. Tomorrow we've got open lines. I want to remind you, anything goes. Well, anything except bad language. That will get zapped along with you right away. But open lines means exactly that. I'm not going to have them screened. Oh, I have thought of a fix for some of our phone troubles. My holdup back in D.C., land of the truck drive-in, I think that's what it is. Really. We'll take your name and put your name up there so that way I can say, hey, Richard, you're on the air. And hopefully there's only one Richard on the line, so we've got quite a few. And that might work. It will not work for tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, you can just let the phone ring until I answer. And that way you'll know because you can do it yourself. Just slam a line and say, okay, you're on the air. So you'll know. But time travelers are welcome. Those who are convinced they are the Antichrist. And you know what? There are a lot of people who are convinced they are the Antichrist are welcome. But basically, anything goes. Anything at all. Well, looking very briefly at the news, Congress now has a 5% approval rating. I believe that's an all-time low. 5%, government still closed, 5% approval rating. And CNN actually said earlier they suggested it possibly may be lower than the approval rating in America of Al-Qaeda. Let's see. A charity, which is sad, is now having to pay military expenses for they continue to be selling for government resumes. Which brings me with you shortly. We're cutting aid to Egypt. Well, we can use the money, right? We can apply it toward whatever's going on right now. NASA's Jupiter-bound spacecraft was going around the Earth, slingshotting around the Earth, actually, headed toward Jupiter, and, you gain speed by slingshotting around the planet to stay close. But as she came around the bend, she went into safe mode, and that's what she's doing. There's a problem on board, so they're trying to figure that out right now. Hopefully it's going to be all right. We don't want to hear about a spacecraft that costs, well, big bucks. Well, speaking of that, there's this, 45-ton spacecraft that's going to re-enter the atmosphere, or something like that. It's pretty big. We've got a picture of it at arco.com, along with a whole bunch of other new stuff you want to take a look at. And don't forget the telekinetic coffee shop. If you haven't seen that yet, it's about the funniest thing I've ever seen. It's hilarious. You're going to want to see it. Anyway, this is such a good-looking spacecraft. The one that's going to re-enter and burn up, and possibly hit somebody on the head. A 40-ton, that's it. Junk satellite is called. But it's beautiful. This thing is really gorgeous. If you could get this down in one piece, try and imagine what it would fetch on eBay. Oh, man. Well, I'd pay a pretty penny for that thing. All right, coming up in a few moments, we're going to talk about Fukushima. We've got a scientist with us. I think you'll appreciate that. I know I do. His name is Andrew Karam. I hope that's right. Karam or Karam, we'll find out. But PhD, CHD, he's worked on nuclear subs, and going to be very, 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 very interesting. It's kind of like my daughter says, every time when I read for work, and I'm in the house next door, so that you know, there I gave it away. I do the show from our guest house, actually, and the reason I do that is because I otherwise would be in the room next to my daughter, and I would wake her up. Because I like loud music. Very loud music. Listen, transmit audio to any nearby radio you'd like to with the FM transmitter 2 from C-Frame. What is this little guy? It's about the most fun you can have in this lifetime. It's an FM transmitter. That's right, an FM transmitter. Not receiver. Transmitter from 88.3 to 107 on the FM band. So any audio you put into it, XM radio audio. How about computer audio? If you're listening to this program on your computer, you just take the audio output, plug it into the C-Crane transmitter, and then you can listen to me on any radio in the house, because this guy will cover every radio in the house. So you can play around with it a little bit. For example, you're never supposed to attach a 30-inch wire to it for improved distance, as in the whole house. Or look on the internet to see what things you can do there. $49.95. It's a remarkable price for an FM transmitter. It's stereo. It's awesome. Well, C-Crane right now, if you want to get one on the way. People are commenting on this, and they love it. The number is 800-522-8863. That's 800-522-8863. It'll operate, by the way, on batteries, or you can plug it in. It comes with an AC adapter. A full FM transmitter. Totally cool stuff. Back in Navy's nuclear power program that included nearly 4 years on a nuclear attack sub. How cool is that? Since then, he's held a number of positions in various aspects of radiation safety, including his stints as a professor, a consultant, and environmental remediation. In the last several years, his work has concentrated on matters related to radiological emergency response. Lots of work for him, most recently traveling to Japan in the aftermath of the Fukushima reactor accident. In addition to his work, Andrew has earned a doctorate in environmental science, author of a number of books on various science-related topics, and nearly 24 scientific and technical papers. Andy has given over 100 scientific presentations on his research and his work. And here he is. Andrew, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you.
And help me pronounce your last name.
So you're close. I think you got it right half the time. It's pronounced Chernobyl.
Sure, okay.
And I'm told that that's an Americanized mispronunciation of the original, but it works for us.
Okay, welcome. It's so nice to have you on the air. I have been talking a very great deal, actually, about Fukushima. And it seems, should I address you as you really are a doctor, so how about doctor?
To be honest with you, I prefer Andy. My great uncle was a doctor. He deals with babies and everything. I usually just bore my students and my kids. So
yeah, I know that PhD and PhD deserves respect.
Well, I appreciate that, but Andy really works better for me.
Okay, Andy it is. So I keep getting this cascading amount of bad news about Fukushima, Andy, and so my first, you know what? What's it like to work in a nuclear sub?
Well, I got to tell you, there were times that we would be out there, and I would just, and this was even after I've been doing it for a couple of years, and I'd be thinking, like, boy, how cool was this? Yeah, there were parts of it, to be honest with you, the military life, the parts of it just turns out much fun. But even the first parts of it, I was sitting there thinking, how many, at the time I was 25 or 26, I hadn't finished college, I was just thinking, how many people are there out there my age who are supervising the operation of a nuclear reactor plant while flying on the Soviets?
Oh, that's what you were doing. You were actually the plant supervisor.
Yeah, I was a nuclear guy. I was responsible for the division of the group of guys that controlled reactor water chemistry and boiler water chemistry and did radiation safety on the show. But I was also spent watch supervising the operation of the propulsion plant. And like I said, there were times that I just really didn't like what I was doing, but I was still aware of the fact that it was just kind of cool.
Well, I suppose to some degree it's like being a Maytag repair guy, because if something does go wrong with the reactor, suddenly you're really busy. And I guess your job is to make sure nothing goes wrong, right?
Yeah, and to be ready when it does. Now, and just as one example, there were a lot of times, most of the time when I was on watch, for example, I would just be sitting there asking myself questions the whole time. What if this happens? What am I going to do? What if that happens? What am I going to say? How will I respond and everything? And to be honest with you, that carries over now. There's times when I'm driving down the highway, I'm just looking at the truck next to me thinking, like, okay, so this tire was on me, what's this for? What am I going to do?
Did anything, I understand there are things you can't talk about. When I get to them, be sure and tell me. Did anything ever go wrong?
Yeah, but never seriously so. And just as one example, we had probably 30 or 40 fires during the time I was on board. Fires? Yeah. But most of them were just really minor electrical fires where you hit it with a little shot of CO2 and fix the circuit breaker to cut off the fire. And it's over. Out of those 30 or 40, we had maybe 3 that had the potential to become serious. Oh, actually 4. But those were things that, we were basically trained so when something happens, you deal with it, and then you worry about feeling scared or worried or nervous or whatever after everything calms down.
I want to ask this, what's it like inside something like a nuclear, one of our nukes, that has the power to destroy a very large part of the world, all contained within one ship?
Well, I can give a partial answer to that because I was on an attack sub, and in the Navy, I think the rule is that anything over a certain length is called a ship. But all submarines are called boats. I said so. Yeah, I didn't hear. I said so. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so the boat I was on had 2 tactical nuclear weapons, so we were not one of the missile subs. Okay. But there, I mean, I remember once when we were offloading the nuclear weapons, and my reactor water chemistry lab was right where they lifted the things out from. And it was just kind of a doctor's brainstorm moment. I opened up the door to my lab and it was just sitting there while they were pulling it off at the warhead section of the high level. I just looked at the guard and said, okay, make it go away. And I shut the door. And 5 minutes later, opened it up and it was gone. Well, it was one of those things, this is how we really didn't think about it too much. They were just there in the torpedo room, along with the harpoon missiles and the torpedoes. But every now and again, I would just find myself looking at it thinking like, okay, yeah, that really is a nuclear weapon. And it was just, well, you were kind of like a hunter killer. In other words, if you were pressing the service, that's the word. You'd be looking for the enemy and with nuclear whatever. Exactly. And using those would have been a very last resort. You know, we didn't even carry them lightly, let alone use them. But yeah, our job, if we were going through the ocean, and once a year we performed an intel mission. I was during the Cold War, so we were off the Soviet Union. But once a year, basically, we went out to sea to gather whatever intelligence we could. The biggest difference between the fast attack boats and the ballistic missile boats was that if we shot a sonar capture and we would turn towards it to try to figure out what it was, we'd get a fire control solution on it and just being prepared. And the ballistic missile boats, their job was to not be found. And so they would turn the other way and just try to get as far away from it as possible. And their biggest weapon was just the fact that nobody knew where they were.
Right. This is just an opinion question. That you can probably answer it. But the world thinks that the Cold War is over. I think that there was news that we had aimed our nuclear weapons at the ocean, and the Soviets, now the Russians, have aimed what they have at the ocean, and all this danger of a worldwide mess is done. In your opinion, is that true?
Yeah, that's not a hard question. Yeah, no, I mean, that one, first, things are not on the hair trigger that they were, but there's still a trigger there. And we could still end up, I think we're probably less likely to end up with an accidental nuclear war than we were in the past. But there's still the chance that something could happen that, you know, whether what I want to say. And let me back up a little bit. I think that the chance of a nuclear exchange between us and the Soviets or us and the Chinese is much less than it was in the past. It's still a possibility, but much less. I think that the possibility of a nuclear war is still quite possible, but it would probably be between India and Pakistan or something like that. And I think that the possibility of a nuclear detonation, you know, whether a terrorist attack or, again, India, Pakistan, North Korea, or whatever, I think that there's still a chance of that. But the civilization ending all that nuclear war that we used to think about, you know, back when I was a kid, and that's what we found, probably when you were a kid too. You know, the chance of that, I think, is much less than it has been any time since the Soviets developed nuclear weapons.
Thank goodness. The Chinese so far don't seem to be adventuresome particularly, and they historically have never been. So I'm not saying there couldn't be trouble because there's families and other areas of conflict that you never know about. Taiwan, I suppose, that kind of thing. But I mean, the Chinese have never been like the Soviets were.
Yeah, but to be honest with you, the nations that worry me the most are the ones that don't have the extensive history of nuclear testing that the U.S., the Soviets, the Brits, the French, and the Chinese have. You know, there's a big difference. And I should say I am not advocating that we should resume atmospheric nuclear testing. You know, I think it's good that we stop doing that. But there's a big difference between seeing video footage of a house blasted apart by a nuclear test and being scribbled on a seismograph that shows the yield of your latest sensor half mile underground. And I just don't know that the leaders of India, Pakistan, North Korea, I don't know that they have that same visceral feel for what a nuclear weapon could really do that we have, having seen, we know exactly what they can do.
I was here during nuclear testing. In fact, I was on the radio once. I was warning people on, buildings to get in a safe place and all the rest of it. And then we rock and roll for a while, and it was the over. Do you think that we would be better off still? I mean, we haven't tested in a long, long time. Are we really sure that everything still works?
Yes and no. And the yes part of it is that between the computer simulations and our experience, and some of the other just testing as in examining the weapons, there's no reason to believe that they would not. But the no part of it, or maybe I'm not quite sure would be a better way to put it, is that I could say the same thing about my car after it's been in the garage for a year and a half. Okay. But until I go out and actually try it, it's theoretically workable, but I don't know for sure until the engine cranks over.
Wow. Wow. All right. I make a mention of all this because it's so fascinating to me, but let's move on to how bad, how really bad, Andy was Fukushima, or he is Fukushima. He's well intense.
I can give you answers on that from two separate perspectives. From the perspective of what happened to the reactors and the nuclear accident part of it, it was bad. There were 3 reactors that went out of down. The 4th one that they had some serious problems with as well. The spent fuel pool, if I remember, was that empty and there was a fire there. And that's, to be most prosaic, that's an awful lot of money down the drain to replace those reactors and to replace the energy that they're not producing now, not to mention the cleanup and everything else. And when I was there, it was I think it was in April, so about a month after the accident, but they were feeling the pinch of Tokyo and in the areas up around the reactors just from losing that amount of energy. So from that perspective, it was pretty bad. From the perspective of the impact on human health and on the environmental health, the environment in that area, I would have to say, not great. You never want to be dumping a lot of radioactivity into the environment, but I don't think that it's quite as dire as a lot of the things that we've read.
I think 160,000 people had to relocate, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like I'm minimizing it. People get died as a result of Fukushima, but nobody died from radiation from Fukushima. The people that died because they were evacuating. And just as one example, and I should say too, I can't forget some of the workers died from the explosions, but they died from the medical injuries, not from the radiation sickness or anything like that.
Did you read the story today? 6 workers at the nuclear power plant have been accidentally doused with highly radioactive matter.
I did not see that one, but I did meet with the doctor when we were there. We treated the 2 gentlemen who got beta burns or beta radiation during their stint when they were wading through the water that had cooled up in the basement. They had leaky boots and the water got against their energy and contact, and they got stinging from that. But there's a difference. Beta radiation only penetrates about half an inch into the body. So you can get slippers from it, but you cannot get stomach cancer or the liver cancer because the radiation does not much reach that deep. But it was kind of like beauty, beta radiation only 10 deep. But, and so those people had some severe burns on their legs. But the radiation goes to the whole body was not all that great. So it's kind of like burning yourself in a fire. You don't necessarily expect to get skin cancer or to have children that come out badly afterwards as a result of burning your hand or your feet on fire.
So nobody has died from radiation yet.
Correct.
Yeah, I think it's a possibility before this is over, whenever it's going to be. It's going to be years and years and years, right? That's right. Yeah, it's a possibility that somebody was going to have radiation sickness. Those days are long past. Because it's only during the emergency that you really have to throw people in and say, just go take care of this problem and we'll worry about the dose later. That's only during the emergency itself. Once the emergency is over, when the fires are out, when people have been rescued and all of that, that's when you've got the luxury, if you want to call it that, of sitting back and kind of saying, okay, so what have we got now and how do we address that without putting anybody else at risk? So the fact that nobody's got radiation sickness yet means that nobody's going to. And I suppose I should back up again too, that radiation sickness is what happens when you're exposed to a blast of radiation in a short period of time. Cancer is what happens when you're exposed to radiation over a prolonged period of time. So there is no longer any reason why anybody should have to get radiation sickness because of responding to Fukushima. So what we're worried about now is whether or not in 5 or 10 or 20 years, people are going to start coming down with leukemia or other cancers. And that's a lot harder question to answer. Right, I mean, you were there. You went to, why did you go to Japan? I was there at the request of a New York City-based non-governmental organization, or NGO, and they had sent some people over there immediately after the accident to find out what the Japanese needed. The Japanese NGO, called the Tokushukai Medical Assistance Team, they said basically that we could come over there and teach us how to work with patients who are from these radiological areas, how to keep ourselves safe, how to recognize that they have radiation sickness, and how to take care of them. So TMAP, through the New York City medics, or New York City medics got in touch with me and two of my colleagues, and asked if we would go over there to help. So what we did was we insisted that we had to spend at least a couple of days in the area that was affected by the earthquake, the tsunami, and the reactor accident, because there's just no substitute for saying this is what I saw when I was there, as opposed to this is what I saw online from other people who were there. So we spent some time in the area. We met with some of the mayors of some of the affected cities. We visited some of the shelters that were there. I made radiation dose measurements all over the place. And we just tried to get a feel for what conditions were like there. What did you find? You measured radiation. A couple of different instruments techniques. One identifies the radioactive size of the thing. We don't hear about like the radioactive iodines or the radioactive fusions or whatever. And I measured there were definitely some of the new classes of iodine that were present. And some cesium, specifically iodine 131, which we also use for nuclear medicine, and that's cesium 137, which we use for industrial and medical purposes, and cesium 134, which we normally don't use all that much. But they're definitely there. How long will cesium 137 last? That's around for a while. It's got a half-life of 30 years, and as they work through the film, we assume that after 10 half-lives, the radiation is effectively gone. That takes it down to 1/10 of 1% of what you started off with. So if we wait for it all to decay away, it's going to take a couple centuries. A couple of centuries. Yeah, so longer than I can wait. Okay, so around this 137 right here is in the water. The water that they're continually dumping on these reactors and trying somewhat unsuccessfully to store. And they put them now in these gigantic, monstrous containers, indeed. And one wonders what's going to happen with a triple-sized typhoon hits the area. And a lot of that 147 water is going to go into the ocean. A lot of it's already going into the ocean. So how serious is that? I mean, there are fish there. Yeah, interestingly, there's a couple reports over the last few years of tuna being caught in various parts of the Pacific that had detectable cesium-137 in them. And one of the things that I did, I contacted the scientists who made these measurements just to get copies of the data. I looked through copies of the scientific papers that were written. And I was doing some of my own calculations just to kind of satisfy my own curiosity about it. And it's kind of like the same thing where you can put the mass reduction talks across the verify. And I mean, first of all,
Yeah, there was detectable cesium in the tuna. But something that a lot of people don't realize is there's detectable radioactive potassium in the tuna also. And for that matter, I've got an instrument at home that I can measure radioactive potassium in bananas or salt substitutes. So there's, just 100% of potassium is naturally radioactive. It's been on Earth ever since the Earth was formed. So the question is not, is there radioactivity there? But whether enough to cause any problems, exactly. Yeah, and I guess as one example, I take a baby aspirin every day because heart disease runs in my family, and taking an aspirin a day, hopefully will have to stay that off. But I also know that if I swallow a bottle of aspirin at once, it'll kill me. So radioactivity, well, I don't know about the beneficial effect. I don't know if there's any of that. Some people think that there are, I'm agnostic on that one. But if the radioactivity levels from the artificial radioactivity are lower than what's naturally there, what I can say is that you're not getting very much additional radiation dose from eating the tuna. And then the question is, well, okay, not much, but is there enough to be serious? And in that one, my opinion is that it probably is not. And the reason I say probably is because I'm a scientist and I'm trying to speak with scientific caution. But if you take a look and do the calculations as far as the actual risk goes, it comes out to far less than the risk just from driving.
All right, and in answering the question so far, I'm going to judge that you are a proponent of nuclear energy. Would that be fair assessment?
I have to say that's something else that I'm kind of agnostic about. I think that nuclear power has its place, but I don't think that it would be appropriate for us to generate 100% of our energy from nuclear power. And just as one example, I spent some time as a professor at the American University in Kosovo, and one of the people that one of my students asked me if I thought that they should set up nuclear reactors in Kosovo. And it sure sounds like a good idea because right now they generate their power with this big coal power plant. You can see the smog from thousands of feet up. But at the same time, Kosovo doesn't really have the infrastructure to make use of nuclear power. And in specific, they don't have the right people there to design the things, to build them, to regulate them, or to operate them. It's something you've got to work your way into.
Now, I'm not so sure that Kosovo knows either.
Well, it does sound like they made some mistakes. And which is one of those things, and in fact, I was logged on to a chat forum with a bunch of your friends, or a bunch of your fans, probably friends too. That was the one you never know. But I was logged on to that before going on the air. And one of the people there said that it sounded as though one of the key terms was trained professionals. And I pointed out, or I replied that, yeah, that is one of the key things. But then I also pointed out that we rely on trained professionals everywhere. The example I use is I wouldn't want my son to cut my hair. Obviously running a nuclear reactor takes a lot more training than cutting hair. But the thing is that pretty much every place we look, we're relying on trained professionals to do a good job, and in some cases to keep us safe. One of the other things that we rely on, and I know that this kind of verges into politics, and I apologize for that, but we also need to have the trained regulators to make sure just to keep everybody on their toes. And kind of like in the Navy, we had inspections from time to time. Now, the captain didn't really care if my shoes were totally shined, but he realized that if he checked out my uniform from time to time, that at least made, or he was at least satisfied that I had all the uniform pieces and that they were, the right materials and everything. And what I mean by that is that during a fire, if you're wearing, say, polyester shoes or pants or whatever, those can melt to your skin, and that's not good. So by having these inspections from time to time, we just made sure that we were doing everything appropriately.
Okay, Andy, the trained professionals part of it, I'm with you there. Now, if we're depending on our Congress, our senators, to implement the right kind of checks and be sure that regulation is as it should be, I'm not with you at all, Andy. I mean, look what happened with the banks in 2008. These are the guys we're going to depend on to oversee any future nuclear plants that might be bills or the regulation of the ones that exist right now. If that's the case, I'm not with you at all.
Well, no, you got a good point, because your regulators have to know what they're doing, and we have to trust not only their content, but
What would you say that trust is verified?
I don't know. For water fluid category, I used to work for the state of Ohio. I did not do nuclear power plant inspections, but I worked at radioactively contaminated sites and stuff like that. And I got to know a lot of the nuclear regulatory inspectors, the ones who did oversee the power plant. And most of them are ex-Navy nukes. Or I shouldn't say most, but a large number of them are ex-Navy nukes. And the reason that's significant to me is, first of all, we had a lot of training. And second of all, Admiral Rickover was incredibly, I guess the polite way to put it would be detail oriented. And it's a culture that does not take kindly to mistakes or to incompetence. I know that there's always the temptation to let standards slide, and I also know that there's not as many ex-Navy nukes as there used to be because the Navy's been downsizing. That's another entirely different subject.
Look, let's look at Japan for a second. Now, the Daiichi plant was in an interesting place. Now, I don't know what kind of oversight there was there during the where are we going to put this nuclear plant talks. But obviously, they didn't take into account, an earthquake of the magnitude that they had, and regarding, what would happen with the wave at all, because it's got discharged. So, what happened to regulation there?
I'll tell you, I would hate to be in the position of having to design something like that. Because on the one hand, if you design the plant to withstand everything that can possibly happen, chances are, and then just to take one example, say you design the plant for tsunami that's only likely to happen once every 10,000 years. If the plant lives after 100 years, there's maybe a 1% chance that you'll get a tsunami that size, and a 99% chance that you'll have wasted money. And it's just a tough decision to make.
Remember this argument when we get over to the upper mountain top.
And it's one of those things too that I thought about a lot on the submarine while I was on that, because our systems were ridiculously over-designed for routine operations. That if we were in a war, we would have been really dependent on every single one of those additional safety factors to keep us safe when the depth started or the torpedo started going off.
I think I was challenged with power because, I had walked into the idea that, Chernobyl was a single containment, it was built poorly, and all those things, I realized how much we need power, and I had become a proponent of nuclear power. You may recall, perhaps you don't, but I certainly was. I said, let's do it right, let's build more nuclear power plants. Then Fukushima happened. And I've got to say, I've really done a turnaround. Andy, I don't see how we can build these things safely. Now, I understand that, you're saying the right kind of oversight, the right kind of professionals on hand, but when you're talking about a 9.4 whatever earthquake and tsunami, I guess you can't build for that. So if you can't build for that, and it's going to have such profound implications when it goes wrong, I'm not so much of a proponent anymore. So I was in your camp, but I'm not anymore.
Yeah, and it gets back a little bit to what we were talking about before the break. And just to take one of the things that you said, we can build a nuclear reactor that will survive a magnitude 9 earthquake, but it wouldn't make any sense to build under those standards in, say, Ohio, which is where I grew up. In Japan, they make more sense, or it makes more sense there. Similarly, it doesn't make sense to tsunami-proof a reactor in Ohio. It makes more sense to do that along the coast also. So the question isn't really so much, can we make a reactor that can resist whatever the challenge is that we're thinking about, because it makes sense to design one that will resist that much, or, basically, where do we draw the line? And can we afford to go where this, that? Exactly. Now, that's how to go into work in a tank, and that'll probably protect me against pretty much anything that I have on the road, but most of the time I'm not going to use that level of protection. So, with respect to nuclear power, the risks from everything else, I cannot tell you that it's risk-free. But I can tell you, it's obvious, you don't have to worry about that, it's obvious. Yeah, and I would not even try to claim that it was. But what I can tell you is that even the accidents that we've had, Chernobyl, which was pretty bad, and Fukushima, which was pretty bad also, they haven't caused that many deaths. And the World Health Organization did a 20-year summary in 2006 of the health effects from the Chernobyl accident. And they were able to find fewer than 100 people whose deaths could be directly linked to the Chernobyl accident. And that includes cancers. And that's far lower than the hundreds of thousands that a lot of people believe. What I thought was, does that include, I remember nuclear, I remember radiation going all over the place after Chernobyl. It was in milk, it was in all kinds of things, right? And so, you mentioned 137. We don't really know over the lifetime of the people that were exposed how many cancers we can really attribute or not attribute to Chernobyl, do we? The World Health Organization estimated somewhere between 4,000 to 9,000 cancers could occur from Chernobyl over 50 years post-accident. And there's no way that we can say that that's trivial or that that's a low number. That's a significant number. But what they also found out was that, and I can't remember the exact number, but it was in the thousands of people who were evacuated from the area have died as a result of substance abuse or depression, anxiety, suicide, and things like that. Basically, they felt that the mental stress from the accident was just as great, if not greater, than the actual the cancers caused by the radiation. And what I thought was the most appalling statistic from that was that significantly over 100,000 women had abortions unnecessarily because they were exposed to radiation from the accident, not enough to cause any reproductive problem. But they not worried them. Yeah, but they were scared and the doctors didn't know enough to say, no, you don't have to worry about it. And I think from that perspective, we can say that misinformation and unwanted fears were far more deadly than the accident itself.
All right. Back to Japan. How far did radioactive contamination spread from the site itself?
Measurable contamination pretty much spread throughout the northern hemisphere. We were able to measure some here in New York, they measured it in Europe, but there's a big difference between measurable contamination and significant contamination. And when I say significant, I mean significant enough to give a radiation dose comparable to, say, an X-ray or a couple hours in an airplane or something like that. And incidentally, I took a dosimeter with me while I could read myself. I picked up more radiation on the airplane over and back than I picked up in 10 days on the ground in Japan, 3 of which were spent in very close proximity to the reactor plant. But as far as significant contamination goes, there are several hundred square miles, or maybe a couple thousand square miles, I don't know the exact number, but it's a fairly sizable area in Japan where the contamination is heavy enough that people really, they're not allowed to live there.
Okay. Right now, I'm hearing that the cores are melted. Yeah, and they don't really know where the cores are. I mean, that's from TechCo. They don't know where the cores are.
They're somewhere on site, but they can't really get close enough to figure out exactly where. But that's, and I guess that was a little bit more flippant and uncertain than I intended it to. But they know that they're there. They're just not sure if like they're in the first sub-basement, the second sub-basement, or that sort of thing. But they have not been flushed out to see.
Oh, that's good. So that's a good thing. Should they get flushed out to see, what would the implications of that be?
probably not something that I would want to be around. I mean,
Yeah, can you elaborate on that?
yeah, I was just trying to think because we've got a number of nuclear reactors that are at sea right now. You know, the remains of the 2 U.S. submarines and I think 9 Soviet nuclear submarines that sank. But those are with exposed cores. Yeah, they're attacked, so that's not really a good comparison. I mean, if all the radioactivity that were in the cores were to get dumped into the bay right there by Fukushima, yeah, so it would be bad for the environment. You know, and they would get aspect of levels of radiation.
But they're bad.
Well, killing things.
Killing things.
Yeah, the sea life, and you probably wouldn't want to swim in the water, although it would give a new meaning to the term lactose.
The water is an ocean.
Yeah, but I mean, and I guess what I mean is if it were put into the immediate vicinity, you know, like into the harbor, the thing is, it's like anything else. The more it's spread out, the wider you can see it, but the less dangerous it is. So sort of if I dumped a ton of dirt on somebody, it would kill them. But if I were to spread that ton of dirt all throughout New York City, it would annoy a lot of people, but it wouldn't hurt anybody. You know, it's sort of the same thing with the radioactivity. We don't want to see it go into the ocean. We certainly don't want to see any more than necessary. But really, the wider it spreads, the less there is available in any 1 cubic centimeter of ocean to cause harm.
When the accident happened, I was in the Philippines living in Manila.
Okay.
And we were really afraid that it was coming our way. However, it really didn't. Interestingly, the prevailing winds apparently always carry it, just like your airplane that went to Japan. The shortest route goes up in Alaska and then on down toward the American Northwest and the American Southwest. Even where I am here in the desert. So, it's a nice little, I mean, if you look at the maps of the distribution, the way it occurs, we're talking about airborne here. It does come here, right?
Yes. Yeah, and like I said, we did measure in the area in New York City. The EPA had a website where they were displaying the results of air and rainwater samples for a couple of months after the accident. But it was, and I know I keep on saying the same thing, there's a difference between what we can detect and what will actually cause harm. So what we measured here, even in the areas that were closest to Japan, were detectable but not harmful.
All right, I want to ask you a question about these melted cores. Is there any possibility that as the core is all melted together, that there could be certainly not any sort of atomic explosion, but could there be a reaction that would release a sudden burst of radiation?
It's not really likely. And the reason for that is because the reactor cores are built with a very specific geometry. You've got long rods of fuel that are arranged in a grid, and there's water between those rods. And the reason that they're like that is that geometry is necessary in order to, the neutrons have to slow down in order to cause the fission, and they slow down by going through the water. So if you immerse the entire core in the water, it gives a chance for a neutron leaving one control rod to slow down before it enters the other, so it can cause fission.
I agree with it. We don't know if I have an error right now. So we don't know if the geometry is still what it was. In fact, pretty good chance it's not.
Yeah, chances are that it's not. It was probably congealed in one big lump or mixed in with concrete and steel and other stuff that melted. But it almost certainly does not have that really precisely engineered geometry that lets you sustain a criticality.
So they did measure some bursts at one point. And we don't mention this.
Yeah, I know that there's measured bursts of radioactivity, but that's more likely to be coming from the water entering a pocket of radioactivity and carrying some out. That's a more likely cause. And what I base that on is that I haven't seen reports of any of the short-lived radionuclides that you would expect to see if there was criticality occurring. So it's more the longer-lived stuff that, to me, seems to be more indicative that water's carrying away stuff that was always there, rather than new stuff being formed.
Okay, here's another question for you. In number 4, there are all these spent fuel things stored way up in the air, and they're talking about the possibility of that collapsing. In fact, I think we're perhaps expecting it to collapse. Probably wouldn't be good, would it?
No. I mean, at the very least, the reason for keeping the spent fuel in a swimming pool type thing, part of it is that the water provides radiation shielding to reduce the radioactivity coming from the spent fuel. Another part of it is to keep it cool. Because that radioactivity, as those atoms decay away, they release energy, and that causes it to heat up. But that will all collapse, you would lose the water, which means the radiation levels would go up, and they'd also lose the cooling. So yeah, that would not be good.
I'm thinking the lots of water we have a typhoon. When you live in the Philippines, as I do, you think a lot about typhoons, and you kind of get hit by them all the time. So my concern would be a typhoon comes along, and that thing collapses, and then we have all this airborne radiation. Or is that just a silly thing to worry about?
No, that's a very real concern. I do not know what it is that they're doing about that, but the way that something like that could happen would be if it were to collapse, move its cooling water, and before they could start to cool it again, if the temperature increased to the point where the spent fuel were to melt, then we could start releasing some of the more volatile radionuclides like the cesium-137 into the air. By now, pretty much all the iodines decayed away. But that's the scenario. I don't know how to hear that. Well, I don't know how likely it is, but it's something that could happen.
Well, apparently the structure is not sound at all, because they keep saying the word about it collapsing. And as far as typhoons are concerned, they definitely come along. So that's fairly plausible, actually. My opinion.
And I guess, see, this is where my inner geek comes out, and I can say that it's plausible, but I wouldn't want to quote you on it.
Well, that's okay. Put me on it. I'm just thinking. And I'm kind of with you in one way. I understand where you're coming from. You're component. And you said, well, we believe use 100% of our energy with nuclear power. We belong to you. How much more energy would we produce with nuclear power?
That's really, and I'm kind of thinking out loud here because, to be honest with you, I've never really thought about that in those terms. So, with nuclear power, we all know the risks of that, and I think the benefits are fairly well known too. One of the biggest ones being those greenhouse gases. So, with coal, believe it or not, you get radiation exposure from that. Because the way the coal forms, you end up with a lot of uranium and coal deposits. So there's radiation goes from that, and then you've got the cost of coal mining and all of that. And then we all know about the oil field accidents and spills and greenhouse gases from petroleum and natural gas. So to me, it's a matter of basically balancing all these risks, the short-term risks of the dangers of getting and using this stuff, along with the long-term risks of, like me living in New York City, having to start investing in, I guess, learning how to tread water better. If you balance all those together, I think probably about maybe 50% plus or minus a little bit of the world's power could probably come safely from nuclear energy. And when I say safe, I don't mean risk-free, but I mean with no more a death toll from nuclear energy than we would see from coal, natural gas, fossil fuels, and that sort of thing.
Okay, 50%, Andy. What do we currently have? Worldwide, if you look at the power produced, what percentage, or do you want me to just talk about the U.S.?
In the U.S., it's about 20%. Worldwide, worldwide it's about 16%.
16%. So at 50%, we have a lot more nuclear plants, wouldn't we?
Yeah, and that's a concern. The reason why that concerns me is, well, there's a couple reasons. One is because a lot of the capacity would be going up in China and India, which are countries that do not have the greatest safety record just as far as any sort of, or making any sort of highly technological thing. For example, there was a high-speed rail collapse in China just a couple of years ago, and they had the Bhopal accident in India where several thousand people died there. Right? Well, the places where we really could use the capacity are places that I don't know if it can be safely built and operated. The other thing that concerns me is that right now we don't have the capacity worldwide to put up high quality nuclear reactors, even in the developed world, at the rate that we would need to try to reach that 50%, or that 50% number. And so it's easy for me to say that ideally it should be 50% nuclear and 50% something else. But when we get down to the practicalities, it's not that easy. In the Navy, we could have a really high quality nuclear power program because what I want to say, we didn't have to worry about making money. The Navy is definitely a nonprofit organization. And so we could build these things to withstand battle damage and everything else and make them as safe as possible. Sure. But with a profit motive, you don't have the luxury of doing that.
Well, here's what I would say. Again, noting that you are pretty much a proponent of nuclear power, and I understand that. But I can tell you this, I think politically, not that I'm not about talking about politics, the chances of more nuclear plants now are, well, can I give you a minus number?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
I mean, there's no chance. None. After Fukushima, politically, I mean, in terms of what people would say, let's say they announced a new nuclear plant, I don't know, somewhere near New York City, let's say, or safely away from New York City, but still close. There's no way, I think, there's no way.
Yeah, it would be a difficult tell. And the nuclear power industry was really getting excited about the fact that, even a lot of prominent environmentalists were starting to support nuclear power, or at least to test it with.
I had sort of over Chernobyl and bought into it, as I said, that single container and with quiet and so on, and then Fukushima. So I think politically, there's no chance. No.
Yeah, and you're right on that one.
I know. Where do we go? I mean, if nuclear is no, and it is, then where do we go? And any thoughts I would sign this?
One of the problems is that there aren't that many types of power or power production you can just plop down anywhere in the world and make enough energy to power a city. Solar power, for example, works great in the desert or a place where you got a lot of sun, but not so good for Ohio.
Yeah, we're putting up a lot of plants out here, Andy, right now. A lot of those, with all these meters focused on a single point, I guess it's very efficient.
Yeah, it can be. But it's a great source of power for the places where it works, but not so great for all over. But one of the things that really struck me was when I was preparing for a lecture for one of the classes I was teaching, I was just looking at where I was just looking at where all the power generation goes in the United States. And I realized that more power is lost by just in transmission than is used anywhere else. More than 50% of the power that we generate is lost just by passing through the power lines.
Oh, I believe that, and they're not maintained particularly well. I'm a hand radio operator, and that power that you talk about that gets wasted in transmission is realized in noise on the radio. So we have operators know about that.
Yeah, and where that comes into power production is the places that are great for producing, say, wind power. A lot of times, those are close to the places where the power is used. And the same thing with solar or tidal or hydropower or whatever. These are all great ways of generating energy, but they're not, a lot of them are not close to major population centers. So ideally what we want is to have some source of energy that is a fairly good way of producing power that you can put anywhere in the country, so that you don't have to, so you don't waste all this energy just basically warming up the power lines. And so natural gas is a good power source. It's clean, you can put those pretty much anywhere, and we've got a lot of natural gas in the country. Its drawback is that it produces greenhouse gases. Coal, to be honest with you, I don't like too much, even though I come from Atlanta and there's a lot of coal mining there. But the coal is one of the dirtier sources of power that we have, and even clean coal technology is still dirtier than a lot of other types of production. You know, fuel oil, we all know the problems with that. And, you know, the bottom line, I guess what I'm getting at is there's nothing that's perfect. And what we try to do is to find the least imperfect solution to the problems that we've got. I guess one other thing I should say too is that not having power is dangerous. You know, if you think about all the things that we've got that run on energy, whether it's or even just our refrigerators or whatever, we can't necessarily conserve ourselves into, if you will, a safer world, because deliberately denying ourselves that power is also going to cause lives. I don't know no easy answers, no easy answers. What they do is they stick pipes into the ground, and then they circulate refrigerant through it, and they just freeze charlotte the soil and the water that's in the vicinity of the pipes. And the intention is to try to block out anything that's coming through. Basically, you make this wall. It's the advantage of an ice wall is that you can put them in, well, I can't say easily, but you can put them in more easily or try to put them like a solid concrete wall. But even better than that, you know, we've already talked about the earthquakes in that area. If you have an earthquake and you've got a slab of concrete going down to that rock, the earthquake can just crack out and you've got to dig it up and fix it. The ice was more or less self-healing. And so you think the ice would keep it around. Yeah, and again, this is a proven technology. In fact, we used something similar in the submarine that I was on. There were times that we had to work on a pipe where we couldn't isolate it by shutting valves, and so we would just pour, or we put a jacket around it, you know, a copper jacket, pour liquid nitrogen through that and freeze an ice plug in the pipe, and let us work safely downstream. Now, obviously, an ice wall is a lot bigger than something you put on a pipe, but it's, you know, again, it's a technology that they've used in a lot of places.
Okay, so if you were in charge at Fukushima, knowing what you know about the state of the disaster today, what would you recommend they do? You know, in Russia, of course, they built this giant coffin over the whole thing. How's that work, by the way? Is it safe?
You mean the sarcophagus launcher?
Chernobyl, yeah. Mm-hmm.
The first one, they just kind of slapped together and that started falling apart fairly quickly. The replacement structure is a lot better. You're never going to have anything that's 100% airtight or 100%, you know, and
the one I like the word coffin better, actually.
Yeah, that works too. But yeah, the problem with the word safe is that it might mean something different to you than it does for me. And you know, to me, for example, when I say that something's safe, what I'm thinking in my mind is that I know that there's risks, but they're acceptable. You know, just to take an example, eating at McDonald's I consider safe, even though I know that there's all those problems with salty, greasy food and I could choke on a hamburger and stuff like that. But the risks, maybe I guess it's because I just look at McDonald's differently than a lot of people. But you know, to me, I consider them safe because it doesn't happen very often. So a lot of people, when they say safe, they mean if there's zero risk associated with this. And don't remember, nothing can be held to that standard. Nothing is. So, with regard to the sarcophagus around Chernobyl, if that's being built properly and if it's being maintained properly, then it should really help to keep the structure from disintegrating further and should help to contain the radioactivity.
Actually, both those things are really good questions in view of the economic condition of Russia.
Yeah, and they have a record of not doing a tremendously good job with some of these complicated projects, or even with some simple projects. If they're building it, I don't know that I would feel as comfortable with it as if, you know, say a European company were building it or an American company. You know, but I don't really know enough about the construction or the design or anything. I don't know who's doing the contract. I can't really tell you how comfortable I feel with it because I don't know enough about it.
Somebody in Canada is asking about one of their nuclear plants out there, and would you say that, and I'll extend it down to the U.S., that our nuclear reactors and the Canadian nuclear reactors are the main group listening to us right now, Canada and the U.S., we'd be safe from a, what was it, 9 point, or 8 point?
Yeah, it was somewhere in the high eights or low nines. I can't remember exactly. The Canadian reactors probably are not built to that standard, but the reason for that is because Canada doesn't expect to see earthquakes of that magnitude. Vancouver area, they might expect to see higher magnitude earthquakes, but most of Canada, and I guess I should say, Brian is from my bachelor's and master's in geology. So I took a couple classes in that. And in most of Canada, once you get past the Canadian Rockies, you just don't expect to see high magnitude earthquakes. So again, the Canadian reactors are probably not built to that standard because they don't anticipate the need for it to be built to that standard. Now, getting back to what we were talking about earlier, if Toronto gets walloped with something that was just completely unprecedented, that means they could have some problems. And then you're looking at the risk, do I expect to see this magnitude earthquake once every 1,000 years, once every million years, once in the history of the planet? And I just really couldn't give you those kind of odds. And I guess having said that too, I should say that Canada's got one of the better nuclear power programs in the world. They just do a really good job. And in fact, I think Canada does a better job than the United States because they use a lot of, what I want to say, they use a lot of similar reactors. So in the U.S., all of our reactors are pretty much one of a kind, which means that if you go from one to another, you got to learn a new plant. In Canada, they tend to use a couple designs over and over again, which means that if an operator goes from one to the other or an instructor, they're in a familiar environment.
Why did we do that? Why have, was it design improvements as we went along, or why have them be different and mandatory?
Part of it is because I think we're trying too much to tailor the reactors exactly to the sites that the company needs. And so they ended up, just maybe making a little bit of an improvement here or a little bit of an improvement there with a software improvement. And maybe it was. But I don't think that they necessarily considered that what might make the plant marginally safer, engineering-wise, might make it a little bit less safe from the standpoint of the operators, the familiarity with it.
Maybe it's so if they have an accident, they can say, don't worry, we'll have it again. Okay.
I don't know that anybody gave it that much thought, to be honest with you. I think that everybody just wanted what they wanted. And they said, okay, so what if they did design and then do this to it because of this location and this to it because of our corporate needs and everything else? And I think they just kind of ended up that way.
All right, let's turn our attention to this area, where I live. And when I say where I live, I really mean where I live. The trucks carrying the, I don't know if it's low level or medium level waste, are coming right through town. Actually, coming right through town. Right through town, maybe. So we're talking about weaponizing and the storage of a very potentially great deal of high level of radioactive waste. And I wonder how you stand on that, on storing this much radioactive waste in Lebanon. This is going to be safe.
Okay, well, Mary tells us faith again.
Well, and so I can't stay away from it.
I know, and I just kind of living a little bit.
Okay,
yeah, let me first start from just the standpoint of the engineering that goes into the task and the radiation dose rates and all of that. And with some of this, I can give maybe a little bit more information because my doctoral advisor did some of the testing on these tasks, including some terrorist attacks on them. And the tasks themselves are pretty well designed. There's a really neat video if you go online. If you just do a Google search for something, I think it's nuclear waste task and training, you find a really neat video of a locomotive rocket pilot being shot into one of these fuel canisters. And you remember that? Yeah, you remember. The canisters are flying off and the locomotive is flying the next 30 feet up, and the canisters kind of mildly sink. Actually, a little bit more than mildly, but it's a shot. They're designed to withstand an awful lot. They're not going to withstand everything, but they can withstand most of the reasonable things that we expect them to see and an awful lot of unreasonable things.
They never tested this with a Roman thickness on that ideas.
Oh, yeah, I've fallen apart with that a couple of times and the pointed toes too. Yeah. But they did test them with shaped charges. So hopefully that would be a little bit worse.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've always heard that they said, and Senator Henry Reid is our senator here in Thailand. He's always been dead set against this idea. I mean, really dead set. I interviewed him about he was absolutely adamant that no, sir, it's not coming to Nevada. Well, when we come to relevant, it's not the high level stuff, I guess, yet. What is it that we're moving over there now?
To be honest with you, I don't know. I know what's happening with the high level radioactive waste. But in all honesty, I had not, or as far as I know, Yucca Mountain itself is never receiving waste. But I do believe that the Department of Energy, at least they used to dispose of some radioactive waste from the DOE complex to put it on the test site. And so it could be trucks of that are going out there. But I'll tell you again, I don't know on that one.
Okay, no problem. Let's talk about the high level stuff. Really dangerous stuff. Now, we've got a lot of it, right? Stored underneath reactors, mostly sitting in heavy weather, I think, safely. You love that word, safely. Heavy weather, right? And that's the stuff that we're going to have to store for some period of time, actually.
Yeah, and this is another one of those things. To me, I guess the way that I look at things is everything is a trade-off. There's no perfect answer to anything. The advantages of what we have right now are that we don't have to transport the radioactive waste. We can basically leave it at the place where it was formed. And so that reduces the risk from transportation. You don't have to worry about a train running as you would spend fuel canisters. If the fuel canisters never crosses the train track.
Right, you're on. That's the thing that won't keep working because you're getting so low.
The transhumanism are being built up, but they've been going with something called dry cask storage, where they take the waste out of the tools, they put them in casks, and then they put those on the surface. I was able to bring those on in Lithuania, which several years ago, because of the storage Chernobyl style reactors, and I saw those spent fuel casks. The radiation dosage side of those things were normal. They were very well shielded, and they were stable. But the downside of something like that is that the things are huge and you can see them from a long ways away. So if you build them already open like that, then it's something that a terrorist can see and that they can try to figure out if they can attack. Can they? They can, but thanks to what my natural advisor told me, it would really take a concerted terrorist attack to breach those things.
Well, most terrorist attacks are pretty concerted.
Well, this is true. But something else to keep in mind is that there's kind of a common view of it that as soon as you reach the fuel rods, everything just kind of whooshes out into the atmosphere. It's only like cutting a slice of pie. If you break open a fuel rod, the nuclides that are closest to that break are going to escape into the atmosphere, at least the volatile ones are going to. And the rest of the stuff is going to slowly diffuse down to that area. So you're not going to get a big whoosh of radioactivity into the atmosphere. What you're going to get is a more gradual release and all of the stuff that really can mobilize. And obviously, the gradual release is worse than no release at all. But it's also better than having everything just immediately enter the environment. It's kind of intermediate. And so, if somebody were to put, say, or shape charges around where we break the crack open, then what you would get would be a release of radioactivity, at least if it was powerful enough to breach the fuel rods.
Well, earlier we were saying that they tried to shape charges and they couldn't, open it.
Yeah, the magnitude that they were playing with. But if you can go to a much higher level, you can always find enough explosives to break it open. The question is whether or not the terrorists would bring enough explosives to break it open.
And if they had studied what they were going to do, they would have.
It certainly is possible.
So if it really goes up, if they had enough shaped charge to really throw this thing human power, that would sort of scatter plutonium more or less everywhere, right?
Plutonium, uranium, and cesium, some of the other products. Yeah, it would be scattered. The negative side is it would be scattered. But that would be negative.
Now, let's actually talk about the itself. Are you a proponent of storing this in American or not?
I think that the safest place for the nuclear waste is in some underground repository and in one place. And the reason for that is because underground, it's going to be isolated from the environment, isolated from people. And if there's an earthquake or organic eruption or something like that, it's going to bury it more deeply as opposed to dropping things over and breaking them open. Whether or not that underground place should be back a mountain or not, well, the bottom line is there's a lot of places where you could put it, and I'll use the word, there are a lot of places you could put it safely underground. The question is whether or not Rocky Mountain is the best place and whether or not it's an acceptable place. Those are two different questions.
Do you have answers?
Not really, because I can talk about the science of it, but I can't talk about the social and the political sides of it. You know, that's a little bit more difficult question.
Okay, but let's talk a little about the science of it. The EPA says the waste would have to stay safe for 1,000,000 years. Is that right? 1,000,000 years, really?
Yeah, and I have mixed feelings about that time frame.
Me too.
My mixed feelings are not whether or not we should be able to keep the waste safe for that length of time, but whether or not we can make any meaningful predictions over that length of time.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but we can't make meaningful predictions into the next quarter.
Well, with the geology, we can probably be fairly comfortable for the time span of maybe thousands to tens of thousands of years. I don't know that we can make an accurate prediction about what's going to happen 1,000,000 years from now.
You certainly can. That's a long time to. I mean, what sort of safety things could you put in place, assuming that in 1,000,000 years we could all disappear due to some biological bug that gets us all, and we die, and there could be another group of humans that would rise from the ashes of the biological devastation, and they wouldn't know that it was there, or would they? I mean, what do you even note?
Actually, it's interesting because back in the 90s, the Department of Energy was actually trying to figure out how to answer just that question. You know, basically, what civilization fails? How are we going to make sure that our great grandchildren understand that they really shouldn't go there?
And later, then, even though they learn about our own beliefs.
Yeah, and they really never came up with a good answer for that. You know, they were trying to think of some universal sign language, but, you know, what might mean danger, stay away, or you're going to die today. And trouble sounds that those are different civilizations might mean something completely happens. Yeah, there's no way to tell. And I don't think that they ever came up with an answer to that question. I mean, one of the things is that if we put it as deep as possible and put as many barriers as possible between the surface and the waste, we'll always make it more difficult to access. Yeah, for example, if we put hardened steel in there, it doesn't calculate the entire thing. But that means that no civilization can get to it unless they can cut through hardened steel. And hopefully by that time, it will also embed maybe radiation detectors. You know, that's just speculation. You're talking money in your head, you're talking more science fiction than you are anything that we can make comfortable statements about.
Totally science fiction.
You know, but then another question to ask is that 1,000,000 year standard something that's reasonable? And that's an answer, I can't really give you an answer to that one either. I know that 1,000,000 years or keeping something safe for 1,000,000 years is going to give us a higher degree of safety than designing something to keep us safe for 100,000 years. But I honestly can't tell you how much radioactive decay or how much radioactivity will be left in 100,000 years versus 1,000,000 years. I just can't give you a good answer on that.
Well, let's talk about those EPAs, for after they say 1,000,000 years. Let me say 1,000,000 years. Why does it have to be kept safe for 1,000,000 years? Or even 100,000?
That's a really good question, and in all honesty, I think that comes out to be, well, first of all, 100,000 years, that number was chosen because it was thought that after 100,000 years, the radioactivity in the nuclear waste will have decayed to the point where really it will not pose a risk. Because, like I mentioned before, 10 half-lives, you're down to about a tenth of a percent of radioactivity that you started with. Well, for a low amount of radioactivity, 10 half-lives will do the trick. But for a lot of radioactivity, you might want to go a lot more than that. And so people went through, they did the calculations as far as how much radioactivity is in the radioactive waste. They said, okay, after 100,000 years, this should be at the point where it really does not pose a significant risk to people. And again, they're using kind of a wheel of that. They're significant. What's significant to me might not be significant to somebody else. And vice versa. And they calculated some numerical risk estimate. They say, okay, when it gets down to this point where there's this level of risk, and whether it's 1 in a million or 1 in 10 million or whatever, at that point, then it should be all right. And so that's where the 100,000 years came from. Where the million years came from, a lot of that I think was more politics than it was science. People are saying, okay, so we're going to take the number that you chose, we're going to give ourselves a safety factor of 10, because if it's going to be safe in 100,000 years, then it will be ultra safe in a million years. So maybe that's what we have to do.
So you think it would be relatively not safe in the first 100,000 years?
Well, let me give you some gradation on that. Right. 10 years after radioactive waste or after spent fuel has come out of a reactor, I don't want to be close to them, because at least not unless they're well shielded and well maintained, because they're dangerous. Like if you were to sit down and burn one of those at the gas table, that would not be good. So that's 100 years. But 1,000 years from now, the individual spent fuel labs are not going to be emitting that much radiation, but they're still going to be emitting some. So then maybe brief cohabitation with one would not be dangerous, but I don't know that I would want to bury it under my house and live with it for a lifetime. Yeah, so it's not one of my definitions for cohabitation. Okay. Well, speaking in terms of really, so that takes us for around 1,000 years or so. 10,000 years, we're getting to the point where a lifetime of exposure to the thing and like household level proximity to a single spent fuel rod is probably not going to give you that much risk, but you wouldn't want to have an entire spent fuel bundle underneath your house. So when you get to 100,000 years, that's the point at which basically the radioactivity is decayed away to the point where you probably could spend the better part of a lifetime in reasonably close proximity to a bunch of it, and the risk for that would probably be no greater than the risk of driving.
Let's use the 100,000 year figure. It's like 10 times less than what the EPA says. What the heck? Let's use 100,000 years. Kind of dangerous for 100,000 years. Agreed?
Yeah.
Well, it just doesn't seem to me, Andy, that we can come even close to guaranteeing anything at all for 100,000 years.
It's hard to do. But let me talk about something else. So this gets more into the geologic suitability, or just being able to lock something away geologically for a long period of time. But there was a natural nuclear reactor that formed in what's now the nation of Gabon. It's in Western Africa. And this thing that actually operated as a nuclear reactor for about 100,000 years or so. And in the course of doing that, it produced a lot of radioactive waste. What's interesting, especially from the standpoint of a geologist, is that the conditions that were required for this to form was that it be surrounded by water and that it be in porous media, sandstone that could hold that water. And in 2 billion years, that's the length of time it's been since the thing shut down. Almost all the radionuclides are still present in that location. They've accounted for just about everything that formed during fission from that. In spite of the fact that it's been submerged underwater and rock with a lot of fractures and pore spaces and everything for that length of time. And I did say virtually all the radioactive material, some of it did escape, but not all that much. The reason why that's encouraging to me is that it suggests that deep geologic burial is going to keep the radioactive material locked up. And so there's that or that length that we can draw from it.
You know, I'm close to young one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You know what I've got here, Andy? I've got a well. That's how I get my water.
Okay.
You know, well, it's really wonderful water, actually. You wouldn't expect it out of the desert. I'm told that we have here in front of actually one of these second or third largest underground sources of water. And it's amazing. It is being taxed a little bit, but it's still amazing. Now, I have these worries about, I don't know, in my mind, I'm thinking of all this stuff buried that's not going to be really safe. Hate bandy that word around. Safe for 100,000 years. Somehow getting into the water table. Should I be concerned about that, or is it safe?
There's a couple things. First is finding a way to get the radionuclides into the water. And this is part of the way for design and the canister design is trying to make that take as long as possible. So that's one of the reasons why these things are surrounded by steel and concrete. And one of the reasons that they chose a place that's under hundreds of feet of rock and still hundreds of feet above the water table is just to make it, in order for that waste to get into the water, you've got to have water percolate down into the chamber where the waste is being stored. So it makes it, they do the dirt. This is true. I can speed up the flow considerably. So it's possible. One of the reasons why they chose the place where they did is to try to maximize the distance that the water has to go and then filter it after dissolve through the container to dissolve the waste out and then reach the water table and flow from there. And obviously it's possible. The question is over what time frame will that happen? And it could be thousands of years, it could be hundreds of thousands of years. But if there were a catastrophe, it could also be centuries. Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns there. But what I would say, and if I were living there, and I know that that's it's easy to say from here in New York, but if I were living there, I don't think that it's likely that it would happen in my lifetime or my children's lifetime. I strongly doubt that it would happen within my grandchildren or great-grandchildren's lifetime. But when you get out into the tens or hundreds of thousands of years, I would say that it's possible, but again, that's what I would hate to have to assign out. I could not say it's 1% chance, a tenth of a percent chance, 5% or whatever. I couldn't get an ounce to it.
So you wouldn't say it's safe?
Well, I would say that the risk is close to zero for the next several generations. And after that, it would be a low number, but I couldn't have any guess as to how low that number or how high that number would be.
Okay, let's talk about France for a moment. No, I don't do a lot of that. I don't talk about French a lot, but they have been doing this thing, this cycling thing, instead of burying the radiation that we've been talking about today tonight. They're recycling it now. They actually had a demonstration on, I forget what it was, one of the network morning programs years ago, and they actually showed the recycling of some pretty high level waste to the point where it was harmless. What are they doing over there, and why can't we do that?
Well, what they're doing is taking from the engineering standpoint and the economic standpoint, they're taking a better approach to it than we have. When you're done, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. Okay. When the reactor fuel is in a reactor, you're burning up the U-235, that's the part that's fission. And it's also producing plutonium because everything that's in there that's not U-235 is uranium-238. And that turned into plutonium over the life of the reactor. So,
I think this sounds like it's going to be a bit of a talk. So I'm going to stop you there. We're going to have this recycling in moment. I'm going to do a break. We just have to do those in radio once in a while. Sirius XM is a great outlet for dark matter. However, there is still need for terrestrial radio when Mother Nature gets rough. The new, and it is a brand new, I don't know if you're a CC radio fanatic or not, I am. the CC Radio 2E from C. Crane, and it's a brand new radio, folks. If you've got one, you know how good they are. This is the new one. The CC Radio 2E is an Echo. Can be your emergency radio. Comes with no weather band. It will receive stuff that other radios, they don't even know it's there. That's how much difference there is in the reception capability. It comes also, by the way, with a 2-meter handband. How cool is that? That's right, 2-meter handband. So this is some kind of radio. It's the best radio you can buy, in my opinion, anywhere in the world. That's how good it is. It has outrageous audio fidelity, which combines with outrageous reception capability. It may have the best speaker on the market with audio tuned for the human voice, because Bob began all this as a talk radio fan. The CC Radio 2E is C. Crane's best radio for AM, and it's probably, in my opinion, the best radio in the world. Also comes with fantastic FM if you're into that. So, to order the new radio, if you want one, it's $159.95. And I don't know, I recommend it. It's money well spent. These people know how to make a radio. Call 800-522-8863. If you're a C. Crane radio nut, I truly am, then you've got to have one of these. 800-522-8863. Tell them Art Bell sent you. And they're, in recycling this stuff instead of doing what we're doing and storing it and not knowing what to do with it. So, what say you? Should we be doing that? Should we be doing what France is doing? Could we begin even now, or is it too late, or what's it?
And actually, first I should apologize. I was flipping into what my kids call processor mode. So I'm trying to be a little bit more flasher-like. But so as far as the fuel goes, but the bottom line is when you pull the fuel out of the reactor, there's so usable uranium and plutonium in there. And there's also a lot of other radioactive material, which is why this stuff is so dangerous. There's usable uranium and uranium and plutonium and stuff. What France was doing, and a lot of other countries too, is they're removing the stuff that we can use again. And they'll have a reasonable amount of radioactivity from the fuel right there. And so they don't have to mine as much uranium, they don't have to process as much. Basically the term for it is closing a loop on the nuclear fuel cycle, and it makes a lot of sense. We stopped doing that during the Carter administration, and the main reason why is because we were worried about the plutonium. That's the stuff that you can also make nuclear weapons out of. And the concern was that if everybody was recycling fuels, that just added a lot of potentially weapons-grade plutonium to the world stockpile. And so the hope was that if we kind of unilaterally went away from recycling or reprocessing fuel, then the rest of World War II, what we did not plan on was realizing that it meant that we would just suck with all this fuel all over the place, and we would have to dispose of it. We can reverse that, but I'm not quite clear on what you said. What you seemed to say was that if other people did it like France and other countries like recycled, that we shouldn't, and the reason would be that it would be less likely that the terrorists would put their hands on it. Yeah, but basically what we were trying to do is to set a good example for the rest of the world, and hoping that if we did everything the way that we considered right, that everybody would say, wow, why didn't we think of that? And that they would just follow us. And what we didn't consider was that the rest of the world might say, well, that's really a pretty stupid idea, and that they would go ahead and do things a different way. So there were just two different ways of looking at it. Yeah, it's puzzling to me. I guess I don't get the psychology of it yet. Well, I guess one analogy would be if you didn't like the way your neighbors kept their yard, and you just said, okay, well, I'm going to keep my yard nice and tidy and everything. I hope that they'll see it, be embarrassed to follow suit. And we can help your neighbors just like whether they have to do that. So you're suggesting the U.S. is a nice tidy yard? Well, that's what we thought. The problem is that, I guess we extend that analogy further, is that we never took the yard tickets out to the curb, so they just kind of left in the backyard. And we might have a nice party here, we've also got a huge compost pile that we gotta do something with. Compost pile. Yes, at least a compost pile. Well, if that thinking might have had a tiny flaw in it, why can't we start recycling? We can, but it's gonna take a while because we don't have the infrastructure set up to do that on a large scale. Which means that we would have to take the 5 or 10 or 15 years, however long it would take to build the reprocessing plants if we do it here. Otherwise, we would have to ship the fuel overseas and let the French or the British or somebody else reprocess it for us. And to send that, but that's not that long. I mean, when you're talking about 100,000 or a million years, whatever, what we say 20 years further. True, but then we're switching between the geologic time frame and the conventional time frame. And I don't know that we can trust Congress if they interested in something for 20 years.
Well, then, and yet you're saying that, I mean, how can we trust them to be good oversight people for 100,000?
I don't know that I trust Congress to be good on oversight for the next 3 months.
You're aware, aren't you, that the latest approval rating is like 5%? The international average earlier that it might be higher than that at all here.
Yeah, and I guess I've got to say I'm one of the 95%. But part of the reason for coming up with the regulations that they're doing, or that they're trying to come up with, or the standards or whatever, is to, they can make it kind of Congress proof. If we've got a facility that we can walk away from and not do anything with for 100,000 years, then it would take Congress actually taking action to hurt it. And
Congress proof. That's less likely than Chernobyl.
Well, maybe a better way to put it is Congress resistant, kind of like the way in high degrees that they say we're resistant as opposed to say we're through.
Okay, all right. What I would like to do is allow some of the folks to ask you questions. And I guess it could range from what it's like to be on a nuclear sub, to Fukushima, to Yucca Mountain, to the recycling questions, all of that. What say you? You up for it?
Yeah, just with just one comment, and that's that I will everybody calling and I'll do them the courtesy of listening to everything that they have to say, but I would like them to they return the courtesy and let me finish my answers before they start off something else.
No, I actually would demand that myself. Okay, so there you go. All right, I think this is going to be Billy from North Carolina. We're going to try it this way. You're on the air with Andy.
Hey, Andy. Hey, Art. Glad to hear you back. It's been something that I've listened to. You hit on it a minute ago, Art, when you talked about the water problem it melting down. But, in Scripture, it says that stars up of heaven.
We're not having scriptural questions.
No, I know. That ain't what I was going to get there. I was going to say, I had a geologist, he worked down on the oil rig. And I was just looking at my Bible to read through it. He said, let me show you something. And he was talking about, he said, you know what? Wormwood is in Russia. And I said, I have no idea. And he said,
well, I know what wormwood is, and we've had nothing left with it. It's dispensed away with a third of everything,
Correct. But what I was saying is, he was saying that a nuclear power plant has the power of a star. The generation,
all right, hold it right there, and we'll deal with that. You said a nuclear power plant has power of a star. Now, there is a lot of power in a nuclear power plant, but it doesn't compete with a star, does it?
No, I think that might be mixing two things up. Nuclear fusion is what powers the sun, but we can't really do that yet.
We're not doing nuclear fusion at all, right?
Well, not in a controlled way.
Right, and not in what you know, for the economic way.
Yeah, we can't draw power from it. The joke is that nuclear fusion power is about a generation away and always will be.
That is a wonderful question, actually. Fusion. Is it really that far away? Henry, and is it the hope that we should hold on to for power in the future, or what?
I guess I kind of look at that the same way as my mother-in-law treating me nicely. If it's something I always hope for, but I'm not really planning on.
All right, let's go to Michigan and Wes. Hi, Wes.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to ask your guys, what exactly would happen if Fukushima didn't melt down even farther, and how about, like a small nuclear device, or ironically, like a Hiroshima type nuclear device, let it off, would it just melt it over and close it off? Is that even a feasible option?
Okay, he is suggesting an actual nuclear detonation at that site as a way to. I don't know what he imagines it would do.
No, but there's actually two interesting things in there. One is whether or not the fuel from a commercial nuclear reactor can blow up, where it can have a nuclear yield, like a nuclear weapon. And that can't happen. The amount of the fissionable uranium in nuclear fuel is just too low to let it explode like a nuclear bomb. It's kind of,
I think what he was doing was suggesting that we have a nuclear detonation at one of these messy sites. I know.
yes. I don't think that'd be a really good idea, because not only would you be setting off the nuclear explosion, which is something I don't think is a good idea to begin with, especially not close to the surface, but what it would probably do would be to not only throw its own fission product into the air, but it would catch up all the radioactivity in the fuel that is underground now, and it would spread out into the atmosphere. Right. If the
I think he was thinking of vaporizing the whole problem.
Right? Yeah, but the problem is that it would vaporize it right up into the atmosphere, so then we would end up with a lot of radioactivity in the atmosphere. So I don't think that would be the best way to go.
Okay, that was worth a shot. Chris and Sarah, you're on the air with Andy, huh?
Hi, Mr. Bill, and Doctor, my question is, and please excuse me for not, I'm going to sound kind of ignorant, but I don't understand, this green substance that glows, could you define it so I could understand it? And then a second part to that would be, is it like, is it natural or is it man-made?
Are you talking about kryptonite?
Well, no, but, you see nuclear stuff that's green and glowing. Is that something that we made, or is it natural rock that we found? Could you break it down for me?
Sure. Yeah, the green glow that most people think about comes from the paint that they used to paint watchtowers with. They would mix radioactive material in with a material that gave off light when the radiation hit it. And it just happened to give them kind of greenish yellow or greenish blue light. But with reactor fuels, you actually get more of a purplish blue glow, and that's from something completely different. It's when you have the radioactivity going through the water, and it's actually traveling faster than the speed of light in water, and that gives off a type of radiation called Cherenkov radiation. So, so two different colors, two different mechanisms. It's natural, or at least I should talk that a little bit. We mix the radium, we take the radium out of the rocks, mix it in with the paint, or with the phosphor, and so that's obviously artificial. But the light that comes out is from a natural process. Yeah, and
we're raising colors here. I do have a question. Every time they talk about Iran's nuclear program, they show a shot of whatever it is, about half filled with something yellow. Is that yellow cake that we're seeing, or what is that?
Yeah, if I'm thinking about the same pictures that you're talking about, it's like it's like a yellow powdery substance, and that's right. Yeah, that's yellow cake. All it is uranium oxide, and it just happens like a nice bright yellow color.
I see.
Yeah, that is what they call yellow cake. Yeah, what it is they chemically separate the uranium from the rock when they mine it, and then they mix it with oxygen. Basically, it's uranium rust, and that's what the yellow cake is.
Well, Iran says they have no interest in acquiring a nuclear weapon whatsoever, and they're not working on it. Do you buy that?
Not particularly.
No.
Well, it's one of those things where the Dutch enrich uranium and the Japanese do and the British do. We trust them. The land hasn't yet earned our trust.
That's true.
Or it hasn't earned our trust, I should say.
There you go. Greg in Alabama, you're on the air with Andy Kim. Hi.
Hey, Andy, the question I've always had is why can't we just go out like SpaceX, put everything in a space shuttle, fly this on the moon, or just fly into the sun, let it just disappear into the millions of degrees of the sun? Why can't we do that?
Gee, I've got an answer, but Andy, you go ahead.
Yeah, the biggest thing is just the expense of doing it. It costs an awful lot of money still to lift even a couple pounds into orbit. And until we can get the cost down to something that the nation could afford, we're just not likely to be doing that.
Gosh, Andy, that would have been my answer.
Oh, okay, what was yours?
Well, I mean, we've already had a couple of shuttles blow up, right?
No, that's true. I guess I was just thinking of one
Re-entering the atmosphere, and then one that just blew up, and then, you know, it was had enriched uranium and cesium and all that in it, and blew up. That'd be an obvious problem, I think.
Well, yeah, that part was kind of so also.
Yeah, it would. Okay, well, anyway, that would have been my answer. Let's go to, Ohio and Scott.
Hi. First of all, I wanted to say that I really saw that email you guys, I think it was yesterday, where somebody referred to Howard Stern, Vice President Howard Stern was hilarious. Because I didn't make that interview with Ron that widespread.
Yeah.
My question is, I don't know if your guest has any knowledge but his energy is his field. Maybe you heard something about it. You never hear anybody talk about 0 point energy, and I was wondering if there was any research being done into 0 point energy, and I'll actually take my answer off the air.
All right, and we've lost our phone system here once again, so you would disconnect that caller. Boy, I'll tell you what, 0 point energy, that really is something that people have been talking about. And yeah, as far as I know, it's not real. On the other hand, you never know. Professor, you may have heard something that I've not heard.
And to be honest with you, most of what I know about that is from watching the Stargate science fiction series. And as far as I can tell, that's a little bit further off that fusion power.
I understand.
So that's one of those things that might be scientifically possible, or at least not yet shown to be scientifically impossible, but we're nowhere close to having that.
So you've actually heard of it, though?
Yes. Yeah, that's how it works. I haven't the foggiest. Yeah, at least not beyond the Stargate explanation.
I feel the same way about my phone system here. I'm going to give it a try. Let's see. This would be New Mexico and Jerry. Jerry, hello. No, it's not Jerry. This is Jerry. Hi, Jerry.
Jerry is actually, but anyway, I actually going off the 0 point energy, kind of goes off and your first call, segue to what I got there is that Mr. Capture talked about how, nuclear fusion probably about 100 years off. And the nuclear rods could actually be, the spent nuclear fission rods could actually be burned, E equals MC squared, in a fusion reactor into essentially nothing.
Well, and actually, that brings up something really interesting, and I meant to mention it earlier, so I'm glad you asked that here. With the spent reactor fuel, if we can expose that to a high dose of neutrons, those neutrons can change some of the radioactive materials in there into something that's so radioactive that will decay away a lot faster. So there have been, I haven't heard about it in a fusion reactor, although those produce a lot of neutrons too. But I have read about possibly starting up a different type of nuclear reactor that works on thorium, and using that also to burn up the spent fuel to transmute it to something that's shorter lived. And maybe it'll be gone in 100 years instead of tens or hundreds of thousands.
Right, so it's kind of just eliminate the idea of having to store this stuff for 100,000 years because, well, by that time I don't, if humanity hasn't killed each other off by then I think we have the power to, we have evolved the technology to get to that point because it was only 150 years ago we had electricity, and 75 years ago that we got the first nuclear power, and 150 years from now, who knows?
Yes, you're right. 150 years from now, who knows? And so 100,000 or millions.
Yeah, I can't, I mean, you can't fathom ideas that far off into the future. But you can see the progression of technology. It goes to that point within the next 150 years, so your storage problems shorten down dramatically into hundreds of years instead of hundreds of thousands. Art, great show, big fan, long time listener, big guest.
Thank you, and do call again. Take care.
Yeah, and in fact, that's one of the things that I think is good no matter where we put the radioactive waste, is that we ought to keep it accessible so that if we do develop a technology like that, we can just take the canisters to wherever the technology is or bring the technology to the canisters and go ahead and start working on it without having to dig down thousands of feet to get it up again. Yeah, so whether it's leaving the mine shaft open or whatever, I think we got to leave our options open. It would be a shame to just cut ourselves off of anything that might come up in the future that could help show us the problem.
Very good point. I mean, should we decide to reprocess, for example?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why lock it away? But then if you don't lock it away, then, well, it's not perfectly safe.
Well, what would be ideal, I think, would be to find something that, and again, it gets into balancing things, that would give us a good balance between being able to retrieve it without having to go to too much trouble, versus not leaving it so accessible that any bonehead can get in and cause problems or get themselves in trouble.
Right. Of course, having all of this material, this really awful material in one place, does present a sort of a national security problem, right?
Yeah, but having it in 50 some odd places also presents a problem.
It does. And transporting it from 50 different places to one place has its own set of problems, right?
Well, there's that too. As I mentioned before, I grew up in Ohio, and they used to transfer the weapons grade uranium from the uranium enrichment plant there to wherever it was the next step to make a nuclear weapon. And they did that without any of those shipments getting stolen. We can transport it safely, but obviously nothing is perfect. What we have to do is just try to reduce the risk as much as we can, and then hopefully have enough contingencies built in or well enough trained people to try to cope with the unexpected.
Okay. Dan and Canada, welcome if you're on the air with Andy. Hi.
Oh, hi, Art. I just wanted to say first, Roswell to Art,
Thank you.
and followed by 7 and also 51s from Belgap. But yeah, no, for Andrew, I'm just going to ask, so
Randy, you can 137s.
okay, well, you know how you say, I know the dew points are a little bit different across America, right? So, what would we, if we talked about, let's say, a Fukushima style thing happened to some of the nuclear plants, or maybe all of them, I don't know. What would be the safest place to be in America if that were to happen, if something of that magnitude was to happen?
You have to specify which nuclear plant you're talking about.
Well, I'm talking about, like, for instance, Northwest Pacific. I mean,
Maybe, I would say Florida would be good.
oh, really?
The fact is that I used to live 1 to 5 miles away from a nuclear power plant when I lived in upstate New York. And the biggest impact was that we got 3 calendars with really good photography every year. And plus, when they tested the sirens, it was kind of annoying. But to be a little bit more serious, or much better, is after several miles away, you can have dangerously high levels of radiation for a short period of time. And by short, I mean maybe for days to weeks. But that depends on, first of all, how much of the radioactivity is released, and second, how steady the winds are, and also how much it gets out into the environment. So, under the worst case, you can have dangerously high levels of radiation up to several miles away, and like I said, that can last for days or weeks. And it would be a long period of time, as we're seeing with Fukushima and as we've seen with Chernobyl, before the dose rate of radioactivity was naturally decayed to the point where you'd be able to go back into the area. So, from that perspective, I guess the safest place would be somewhere upland, for prevailing winds normally blow from west to east. And so the safest place would probably be somewhere to the west, and say 10, 20, 30 miles away. But having said that, I just do feel obligated to point out that even in Japan and even around Chernobyl, the area where the radiation really was dangerous for a prolonged period of time was much smaller than that. One other thing that I should add too is that in any radiological accident, whether it's a nuclear power plant accident or nuclear weapons or radiological dirty bomb or anything like that, the best thing to do is to go inside, hopefully into the basement if you're in a house in a basement, and to shut the doors and windows and to put your air system on recirculate. Because what that's going to do is to keep you as far away from the radioactivity that's coming down as possible, and it will keep you from breathing it in until it all settles to the ground.
Well, and hello, doctor. Fukushima, those diesel generators, is that what caused the whole thing?
Yeah, that was a really big factor. And that is where they just made a mistake. The diesel generators were in a place where they could be flooded out. And what happened, well, first of all, the reactor did what it was supposed to at first. It had a huge shock that shut itself down, but then there's still all this radioactivity in the fuel line and they'd heat them up. So you've got to keep circulating water through there. And when they ran out of, when they started losing the water, and that's when the diesel generator comes on. Well, or actually, the diesel generator comes on when they lose power, and that's to keep the pumps running, to keep pushing water through the core, and also to pump new water in to make up for the water that's lost. Without the diesel generator, they just couldn't do that, and the core around it.
Right, they scrapped it at perfect time, but if the generators were on fire, it would have, I heard about this, when it first happened, and nothing months after that. The TEPCO, the generators should have been higher up. So,
yeah, but there were a couple of things they could have done differently. One is they could have put a bigger wall around the generators. They could have built a bigger seawall to shield them against the higher tsunami, or they could have put the generators higher up. And that's one of those things in retrospect, they probably should have done one or more of all of those. But again, getting back to what I mentioned early on, is that they just didn't think it was necessary because that high tsunami is supposed to only happen once every maybe 10,000 years or so.
Eddie, a question for you. If the generators had been in a safe place, safe, but if they'd been in a place where they would have continued running, let me put it that way, would that have kept everything okay?
But they would have had a better shot. They were still losing water from the reactor, and they would still have had to been able to suck water in from the ocean to put into the reactor. But at least they would have had the pumps to be able to do that if the pipes were still intact. And so, yeah, so maybe a better way to put it is without the generators, they just didn't have a chance. With the generators, they had a better chance.
Okay, let us go to Wyoming. Kenny, hello.
oh, hello there, how are you all tonight?
Very well, doing well.
Oh, good. I love your show. I've listened for a long time, and I'm glad you're back on the air. Andy, I've got two sons that are, I know you knew. One's an EM, one's an NMELT.
Oh, that's what I wanted. The machinist mates and the ELT is engineering Rochester.
Yeah, they're both top side, and anything but subsurface.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's too bad, but still, good for them.
Yeah. Hey, I was going to ask you a question about the recycling, which you answered my question, and I just enjoyed listening to you guys tonight.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and if I could just say one thing about the training that your son has gone through, that was, in my opinion, Naval Nuclear Power School and the nuclear power training was more difficult than the masters and the doctors that I got. So for them to get through that really speaks highly of them.
The one thing that we've covered tonight, Andy, that I just can't seem to wrap my mind around this recycling thing. It just doesn't seem like enough to say, well, you know, we've got a different kind of yard and psychology over here, and so we're not doing it. I just doesn't seem like enough of an answer about why we're not recycling. What do you think?
To tell you the truth, that answer's not what I'm trying to find to me either. But everything that I've read on it basically comes back to the same thing. That Carter was trying to set a good example for everybody else, and instead of trying to cut back on the proliferation risk through treaties and everything else, he just figured that we set a good example for everybody that would follow. And he made a mistake.
Hey, John in Arizona, your turn, baby.
Yeah, Mark, Andy, I'm from Paducah, Kentucky, and they're shutting down the Paducah gaseous diffusion plant, and also across the river, Honeywell. They do something with nuclear material also, and Joplin, Missouri. That place is totally contaminated. I know people live around there, you know, they shut them off from their private wells. I knew a guy that worked on, friend of mine that worked on X-ray equipment hospitals, and he drove down the road, and Geiger counter went off the chart. I mean, you know, how are they ever going to clean that place up, and why are they shutting it down?
Okay. And first, I spent a summer in Paducah doing some groundwater work with the company that I was working for at the time. And what we were doing was putting in wells to monitor, I think it was the Northwest Plume, to look for the radioactivity in there as well as some of the chemicals. Beautiful place, really nice people.
Is he right, Andy? Is it a mess?
Yeah. Part of the problem is that before we knew any better, one of the accepted ways for cleaning up contaminated water was what they call total column treatment. Because when you pass dirty water or contaminated water through a total column, a lot of times it will swell up into the contaminant. And that used to be something really free before we realized that it was really not all that right away to go.
It keeps going and gets into the groundwater.
Yeah, it eventually saturates the soil, and so it goes into the groundwater.
So how does that hard to anticipate? I mean, if I go out and make a whole bunch of water and water and water, I know that water's going to go down. I probably need other water down below the ground. I mean, wouldn't that be the first thing you think of? So,
yeah, but at the time they just didn't want as much of our groundwater and not as much of our contamination as we do now. Part of the reason that we can say that it's kind of stupid today is because we made these mistakes in the past. You know, just like I've learned from a lot of the mistakes that I've made, I don't do those things anymore. Unfortunately, the mistakes that I made only affected me, and where the mistakes that the Department of Energy made affected the people who are downstream. You know, they, to their discredit, they were doing these things that don't make a lot of sense, and they did try to sell it or to downplay it for a long time. To their credit, at some point they realized that they had to do things differently, and they are starting to clean it up. But there's no way around it. It's going to take a long time to get the contamination out of there. Yeah, it's going to cost a lot of money.
it's how long would you guess?
It's probably going to be decades.
Decades.
Yeah, as far as how many decades, I don't want to guess there, but it's going to be a long time. I don't expect to be around to see us finish off.
Would you live there?
Yeah. Yeah, well, like I said, it's a pretty town. The people are nice. It's a beautiful part of the country. And I would just make sure that either A, if I had a water well, I would do some testing and make sure that I was upstream from the plant. Or B, if I was downstream of the plant, I wouldn't have a water well. I would ask the Department of Energy to make sure they remembered me when they were bringing in the water to other people.
And such a Geiger counter.
Well, there's that too. And I guess the other part about it is that if I'm working with it long enough, that I at least know the tests to do and how to do them to satisfy myself that everybody's being on the up and up with me.
Alabama, LV. You're on with Andy.
Two things. Exercise properly with Max, because in your wheelhouse first.
I don't know. I'll check into it.
Also, yes, Andy, what kind of timeline are we looking for before we're, atomically altering elements? I mean, that can't be more than a few hundred years out, right?
No, actually, we're doing that now. But I think when I say that, I might mean something different than what you mean when you say that. But every time we put something into a nuclear reactor, we're bombarding neutrons, and that causes it to change into other elements. So, and nuclear fission is another way that changes the uranium atom into a couple of that maybe cesium or technetium or something like that. So all that stuff really is altering the atoms, transmedium and other things.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. Thank you. Thank you for calling, and please call again. So we'll hop over to Pennsylvania and Ed.
Hey, yeah, I was just wondering what you guys thought about atomic batteries, using the waste in atomic batteries or radioisotopes from electric generators. We know some of our spacecraft have had these things and some people fly with reactors and these atomic batteries are used. I just wondering what you guys think about that.
Yeah. Thank you.
And
actually, we are doing that atomic stuff. But a lot of that gets back into the whole recycling fuel stuff. If we just whack it away, then we can't really take anything out of it. So the Soviet Union did make a lot of the radioisotopic thermal generators, and we've made some also. But believe it or not, right now we're buying plutonium from the Soviet or from Russia. Sorry, we're buying plutonium from Russia for our space grants. Yeah, but no, the caller is absolutely right that if we did decide to start reprocessing fuel again, one great way to get rid of some of the radioactive materials would be to make RTGs, and I guess that would be kind of a low volume way of doing what another caller said about blasting it into space. We wouldn't be able to get rid of all of it that way, but some of it. Well, we actually do blast some into space. I mean, we launch satellites that are powered, have nuclear power on board, plutonium, in fact, and people sort of don't seem worry when they launch those. How about you? No, and even when I lived in Florida, I really didn't worry about it too much, just because they go through so much testing on those things, right? And talk about something that's over designed. It's that, you have one of the rockets gets blow up, and it just really wouldn't even make a dent in the capsule. All right, to Pennsylvania again in Todd. Hello, Todd.
Anyway, there's an article that was in Paper Science years ago where they put the material with the control rods and made out and dropped over the X-rays, and it gave off 10% more energy and gamma rays. And I don't know if there's anything else about that since I read that last night. There's never seen anything about that.
Boy, that's something I haven't really heard. I'm trying to think how that might happen. And that's just something I can't really give you a good answer to without wildly guessing. I prefer not to do that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was either proper mechanics or proper science, but these would give clear examples like it could be used, to power a boat or an airplane,
Oh, okay. I think I heard some kind of speculation that if you bombard certain types of atoms with low energy X-rays, then it'll trigger them to release higher energy things. But what's happening there, it's kind of the equivalent. If you have a ball on the top of a table, you might only have to give it a little push. So you only have to give it a little bit of energy to get it to drop off the table, and it hits the floor with a lot more energy. So, so they're doing the equivalent. They're kind of giving a little push to an atom that's already radioactive. And the thinking is that maybe if they did that, it could trigger it to give off a higher level of energy. It's one of those things that sounds interesting in theory, but as far as I know, nobody's ever managed to really do that in a reliable sense.
Okay. Did you guys always cover the thing was in the news today about a new discovery of lasers, nuclear power?
No, I don't think I heard that one. I've not heard it either. What are we talking about? Well, I didn't catch all of it. There was mention of lasers and nuclear power kept going across the screen, and every time I went to look at it, I just would catch the end of it. So, and I basically done what it says, so I didn't have to, cover that on.
Actually, I think what you might be talking about is they found ways to enrich uranium using lasers instead of the gas centrifuges or gaseous diffusion. Really. And the laser enrichment is actually kind of clever scientifically. But what they're doing is effectively is just picking out, almost sorting it atom by atom to enrich the fuel instead of kind of the gross approach that we're doing now is more like putting it through a series of filters. So that's one of those things that they have shown, but it does work. They're just trying to figure out how to make it work on an industrial level instead of on a laboratory scale. Interesting. All right, so California and Mike, you're on the air with Andy. Huh?
Andy?
Hello.
Andy, question for you. And I know that it jumps into the political realm. But what about building a mega reactor in Yucca, out there by our house that was back, so that everything would be contained in one spot? And as technology moves forward, maybe we could recycle this. And it's all in one spot.
But that's one of those where I'm going to have to kind of dodge it a little bit by saying technologically it makes an awful lot of sense, but I'm not quite sure how it would fly politically. Or, well, they don't tell me wait a minute, Andy. Okay, so maybe I'm wrong. No, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying the idea of a mega reactor is very, very interesting. However, earlier in the program, we were telling us that the delivery of electricity from point A to point B, say New York, would make it not so workable. Well, I mean, because if it is workable, then we should be able to deliver tons and tons of electricity from all the sun and the wind that we have here in Nevada. Yeah, and actually, I guess there's a couple parts to that. The one, the transmission losses. My guess is that, well, I know there's like a mountain not too far from Las Vegas, and Las Vegas, every time I go there, all those lights are just thinking about megawatt hours. Oh, there's other things I'm thinking of too, but it's one of those things that comes to mind. I see. So, from that sense, a reactor like that could deliver power and probably economically to Las Vegas. Los Angeles, I know, is further away, but they also use a lot of power. And given a lot of losses, you lose a lot of energy, but it would still be a supply of power there. But another way to look at it is if you build it to produce power, then it's probably not that cost-effective a way of doing it. If you produce it to try to help with the radioactive waste problem and the power is a byproduct, then I would say that you've got possibly a cost-effective way of dealing with the waste and a great side effect that you're also generating power with it. But that would be kind of like using your toaster to heat your home, saying that, okay, my goal is to cook the toast, but it also wants my kitchen. Alrighty. All right, here we go. The Fukushima nuclear disaster showed us, once again, that nuclear reactors are fundamentally dangerous. Not only do they cause significant damage to the environment, the health of the population, and national economies, the heavy financial cost of the meltdown is inevitably borne by the public, not the companies that design, build, and operate the plants. None of the world's 436 nuclear reactors are immune to human error, natural disaster, or any of the other serious incidents that cause a disaster. Millions of people who live near nuclear reactors are at risk. Any thoughts on who might have done that?
Wow. And it sounds like the point at which we should be the equivalent of animal, vegetable, or mineral, but I guess it would be like political, scientific, or other.
But, green. Huh. Peace.
Okay.
I gave it all away.
Okay.
Greenpeace wrote that. Would you fundamentally disagree with that premise, or how do you feel about that?
I would agree with some of the individual statements that they made, but I think that I would disagree with the conclusion. Because we could also make a statement that cars are fundamentally unsafe, that a lot of people die in traffic accidents and they steal the greenhouse gases and everything, and so we should ban cars. But we've made the decision as a society that we get enough benefit out of cars and trucks and other things like that, that we're willing to accept the risks that go along with it. So with nuclear power, they're correct in saying that there are risks associated with it. And they're also correct in saying that the cost of the cleanup will be borne by the public. But I should also point out that that's the case whether the cleanup is paid for by the company or by the government. If the government pays the cost, then we're paying it directly in the form of taxes. If the company pays the cost, we're paying it indirectly in the form of increased electrical bills. But either way, it's the people that pay the electricity, or that pay for electricity, who pay the taxes. They're the ones who get stuck with the bill for cleanup. It's just how easily or how easy it is to see that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's talk about money for a second. When you talk about something like the S.A.E plant, what do you think of that cost to build?
Probably in the billions of dollars. It would have not many. My guess would be at the time it was built, probably a couple $1 billion. In today's money, it would probably be 10, 20, somewhere in that range.
Wow, that's a lot of inflation. All right, so what do you think by the time all is said and done, it will cost to clean up the mess there? Where is done?
Yeah, we're again talking in the tens of billions of dollars. So if they decide, and the variable in there is how big an area they decide to clean up and how thoroughly they decide to clean it up, or the methods that they use.
I see.
The easy way to do it would be, actually, the cheapest way to do it would be just to put a big fence up around an area and say, okay, nobody goes in here for 300 years. If they decide that's not acceptable, the next easiest way to do it would be the equivalent of sweeping it under the rug. Pluck in a lot of dirt, pour the dirt on top of it, and just cover it up. But that's probably not an acceptable way to do it because the contamination is still there. The most thorough way to do it would be to say, okay, we're just going to scrub down everything that's about what was here before the accident. We're just going to haul that away and find some place to bury it. And then we're going to replace the topsoil because, of course, if you take it down below the living part of the soil, then you're just left with minerals and that won't grow very much. So, but that would be the most thorough, but also the most expensive.
Yeah, and I wish we could just sweep it up and let it.
That would, well, I would probably have the same reaction to that as when my son's trying to do it or shove all my stuff under the fence, saying, wow, it looks great, but let's take a look at what you did and why not get highly reflect out somewhat too.
Yeah, you say.
There's a couple things. I mean, first of all, until you bring in and you just decide to bury that entire part of Japan under a foot of clean topsoil, well, they'll reduce the radiation just right at the surface. But then you got to think that all the plants that you plant there, the roots go out, go down more than 10 feet or more than a foot or whatever. And so if the roots go down into it, and we're going to start bringing the contamination up and putting that into the trees and the leaves, pretty soon it's just migrating up to the surface. Oh gosh. So if you're going to take that, right, you've got to bury it deeply enough so that the roots can't get to it, but not only that, but so that the worms, the burrowing animals and all that, so they can't bring it up to the surface either. So, it's kind of like shoveling everything under the carpet and realizing you have this big lump that you still got to try to figure out what to do with.
That might be glowworms, huh?
Well, I guess as a scientist, I have to say that if you radioactive material, you don't blow, but it's still a great damage.
Let's go to Illinois and Scott. Hello, Scott.
Hey, Art. Roswell is 51, and again, now we're doing cesium 137 to Andy.
137 to Andy, yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to give you one statement and then one comment.
Sure.
I used to live in northern Japan. I was stationed in Misawa Air Base in northern Japan, and I've got a lot of friends there that are really worried about it. So, we're just, I've been off the job to go back, and I've kind of been hesitant to do that. So I know that it's not just me, and it's not just my friends here in the Air Force. I know there's a lot of other people out there that are quite scared of the area. So, I don't take my answer off the air, but I just kind of curious what you thought about being frightened over this in that area of Japan, because it seems like they're talking about getting it fixed and not really reporting at all. And then my question was about future technologies. I was kind of curious what you thought about, like, using some form of molten sodium or something, using almost like a dynamo effect instead of nuclear energy, using a dynamo. And
My last comment, sorry, I didn't get all this out there real quick. The 51 wouldn't let me get away without saying I am Steel Boss, so thank you for fixing the matter.
You're very welcome. That's the internet nickname. All right, so the fear factor, and that's a quick conversation for sure. The fear factor.
Yeah, and when I was there, we got as close as